Hello, everybody. I'm Matt Pierce, Creative Director with Route 3 Productions in Floresville, Texas. And thanks for joining me on this edition of The Cutting Room Floor, where I'm going to be talking about choosing a photographer for your special event or your wedding or whatever the case may be. I'm going to talk a little bit about some things that you should know and give you some insight into the photography business itself to help you make a better informed decision. And I'm not saying you should go with us by any means because, well, it's totally subjective. So in this episode of The Cutting Room Floor, we're going to be talking about choosing the right photographer. Well, hey there, everybody. Again, I'm Matt Pierce, Creative Director and one of the photographers here at Route 3 Productions, and welcome to The Cutting Room Floor. This is the first episode of this. We've never tried this before. This is brand new to us here at Route 3 Productions, though we've done some podcasts. This is kind of new here, The Cutting Room Floor, and this is a show that brings you kind of the insider's perspective on photography. And today's episode, I decided to focus on one of the most crucial aspects of any event, and that's choosing the right photographer. Now, what I hope to bring you here in this episode is to give you a little bit of insight into the different styles of photography, help you maybe figure out what style of photography you want, what kind you like. Again, photography is art, right? It's purely subjective. There's a lot of generalists in the world who they go to like Lewin Marks and they get the presets and they just slap a preset on there, and that's fine. That if that's what you do, that helps your workflow if you're a photographer, right? But it also comes down to delivering a good product. So I want to help you understand the photography business to help you better understand how to be an educated consumer, whether you go with us or whether you go with somebody else. It really depends on your style. And what do those styles look like? Well, there could be documentary photography, which is kind of like photojournalism photography, right? Everything is kind of done point of view. It's very raw. It's very real. That we do a lot of this. We call it neo-traditional, kind of where the classic and the contemporary come together. There's portraiture photography, where if everything is kind of focused on the portraits of people and the portraits of things. Portraiture is a very different style of photography. And then you have fine art, which we kind of merge with the fine art thing. But then you have edgy and bold, right? Which is, there's all different types of photography out there, all different types. And a lot of photographers you see trying to do different types of photography. A good photographer will niche down, right? And figure out what it is that they do best, and they will generally stick to that without much deviation, okay? So a lot of people hire a photographer based on the price, and then a lot of people will choose a photographer based off of their style and what they want. Those are the most educated consumers, okay? So you don't hire somebody based entirely off of your budget. You hire somebody who shares the same vision as you. And the importance of knowing what style suits your event can make or break you, right? It really can. It can make or break you. It can be the difference between having great photos that you're going to cherish for a lifetime and just having some photos that are, okay, whatever, okay? So knowing the difference. In good photographers, real professional photographers, are trained in very different aspects. Very few of them are complete generalist. In fact, I don't know if you can be, if there's even a such thing as a complete generalist, right? But I think how to determine which style resonates with you and your partner, or your, whatever, whoever's vision, right? How to determine which style resonates with you is look at a lot of photos. Look at the different styles. You can Google something. You go on Flickr. There's I generally stay away from Instagram, and I generally stay away from Pinterest and things like that. Just too over diluted. Okay, everything begins to look the same. But really research. Go to individual photographers' websites, look at what they do, and get the inspiration directly from there. I generally stay away from the social media thing because social media that's a whole other episode. Because there's a lot of people out there who are on social media who are just faking it until they make it, right? Because I mean, everybody has a camera nowadays on their phone. Or everybody has, a point and shoot for $500 and, they think they're a photographer. So, but these real photographers, these true professional photographers will have a style. And they generally don't deviate too much from that style, whether it's photojournalistic, documentary, portraiture, fine art, edgy, whatever it is. They'll generally do that. So stay away from these people, I think, that try to be all things to all people, because you just can't do that. Okay. Now, the discussion on the importance of the photographer's experience in their portfolio is equally as important, because a good photographer will say, hey, here's my portfolio. This is what I do. This is how I do it. This is my style. They're going to know what they do. Kelly and I do neo-traditional, which is kind of a cross between contemporary and classic photography and photojournalism. Okay? Depending on the event. Now, some require more of that photojournalistic look, where it's just raw, real, in the moment, very few edits, and then some of them have a little bit more edited, kind of crosses into that genre. You may say, well, Matt, doesn't that sound like a generalist? It really doesn't sound like a generalist if you think about it, because what we've done is we've created a style that's fairly unique to us and what we do, right? So looking at that, the way that you do that is through experience, right? You don't just go out and buy a camera and say, I'm a photographer. You don't do that. It takes a lot of years of learning under someone and practicing it and being really good at what you do and honing your skill and really practicing what you do to develop your own style. Okay, I think there's this bad idea that people become an overnight success, right? They go out, they have a passion for what they do, and then they go out and they buy some equipment and all of a sudden, I'm a photographer. Well, it really doesn't work that way. I don't think people really understand, the real professionals understand this, that it takes years and years and years to figure out your style, what fits, what works for you, and how you do it, and be true to that. Those are the real photographers. Those are the ones who demand a little bit higher pay. Those are the ones that spend a little bit more time working on creating good images that you're going to remember. Okay, so there's also a good discussion to be had about the expertise in specific styles that can really impact your choice of photographer. So like with us, we focus very heavily on the documentary and not so much the fine art. There may be some fine art photography thrown in there from, say we're doing a wedding. But for the most part, it is documentary, neo-traditional, classically contemporary photography. And that's our brand. Now, if you go out and you hire somebody who's really good at portraits, and they're going to spend some time on those portraits, and they're going to spend a lot of work on those portraits, and they're going to nail them down really, really good. And so it's very important to understand the very specific styles that are going to impact your choice. Now, real life examples of how a seasoned photographer has made a difference in a wedding or special event, right, comes down to a lot. It might be the photographer is very, very good at portraits. So you need somebody who's very, very, very good at portraits, because that's what you want. You want a lot of portraits. Well, they're going to go in, they're going to soften the skin. They're going to, everything they do in their editing process and in their workflow which could require, literally hundreds of hours to go in and touch every single photo and smooth the skin and remove blemishes and all this stuff that they do. Portraiture is a beautiful form of art. It's an absolutely beautiful form of art. But it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of energy. These guys are going to, and gals are going to demand that their time be compensated, as it should be. So a real life example of that is, say, the White House photographer, right? The White House photographer is going to spend a lot of time working on these candid shots. And I think that's kind of what Kelly and I do a lot of, is these candid, raw shots that are really blended perfectly to tell this story. That's what we do. But a good seasoned portrait photographer is always going to be looking for the next portrait, right? They're going to be looking, where does the background look nice? Where does the bokeh look nice? Oh, the lighting looks good here. This backdrop looks good. They're going to be set up specifically for portraits. And the same way goes with, fine art photographers or edgy photographers. They're always looking for something that fits their style. And they should be. They really should be. So keep that in mind, right down to when you're picking the venue. If photography is important to you, think about the venue. Consult with your photographer. Your photographer should be one of the first people that you hire, because they're going to be able to give you good, solid input and guide you along the way. If photos are what's really important for your for your event, whether it be a wedding, a birthday party, quinceanera, whatever. So getting into the equipment and technology part of it, equipment is not cheap. The average lens that we have is probably $1,000. We use exclusively Canon equipment. On average, our lenses run about $1,000 each. Okay. We have a wide range of lenses, from very wide angle lens to telephoto, right? To help us get the photos that we need. So equipment is very expensive. Then you have things like Capture One or Lightroom or whatever the photographer's using. That cost money. Insurance costs money. That these are things that are very, very, very important. And the quality and range of equipment matters a lot, because if you hire somebody who's just got, say a Kodak, right, camera, it might have a lot of noise. It may not shoot best in low light conditions. We have the camera that I use. I can crank that thing up to 35,000 ISO, and I know this is getting a little techie, but I can crank that thing up to 35,000 ISO and still get a pretty good picture without a lot of digital noise. If you get something, and sometimes you need that, right, to catch a low light photo, done in the right conditions. But if you go and get, say, a Kodak camera, you may not be getting that, or if you get some aftermarket camera, maybe somebody doesn't know how to use that camera or whatever. You hear photographers talk a lot about this. It doesn't matter the equipment. If you're a good photographer, you can get a good picture. I agree with that to some extent, but also having this equipment and investing in your equipment, like the Canon RF lenses and stuff like that we use, you can crank these things up and use these tools to create a better product. Now post-production, like editing and things like that, this can take a while, but there's also expenses involved in that. Like I said, whether it's Lightroom, Capture One, whatever. I use Capture One. These are all expensive. We have to pay for these things. And then if there's maybe additional services like a second, third, sometimes even a fourth shooter. Maybe you want an engagement shoot location. Those are all extra. These, maybe you have to travel, we have to travel, whatever. we have to work at certain hours of the day, especially on a shoot, where there might be blue light or there might be, golden hour or whatever. We have to think of these things. The time needs to be compensated. And so understanding the value behind the price tag is really important. You may look at this and think, oh my God, they charge $5,000 for a wedding. You have to look at all these different things all the time, okay? There is no such thing to me. It's just, well, we just need a photographer for a couple of hours. No. If you approach me and you say, I just need a photographer for a couple of hours for my wedding reception, I'm going to, no. That is an absolute no. We don't do half days. We don't do any of that stuff. It's all or nothing. Okay? Because I've been in this situation too long, in this business too long, to understand that usually when we get out there for 2 to 4 hours, somebody's only going to want to pay us for 2 to 4 hours, and we're going to be there for 8. And it happens all the time, especially if you allow this to happen. And then you have to worry about trying to collect on that and getting compensated and stuff like this. No. And then people go on Instagram and Yelp and everything else and say, you didn't deliver my photos like I wanted to. Well, you didn't compensate me for the 8 hours I was there after you told me you were only going to need me for a couple of hours. It doesn't work that way. It does not work that way. So don't approach your photographer and tell them, I just need you for a couple of hours. Don't. Because there's no such thing to a professional photographer as working just a couple of hours. Okay? They know that editing is going to take 4, 5, 6, 10 hours, whatever. So think about that. Okay? And then, like with Kelly and I, there's always 2 shooters. Kelly and me, right? There's always 2 shooters. That's built in. Why? Because Kelly has a little bit different style than I have. We on a wedding day, Kelly normally goes with the bride. I normally go with the groom. We split up. We do our thing. And we meet back after it's all said and done. That's photography. Okay? This is planning process. Okay? So you have to be aware of these things. And then making the right choice for your budget, right? So tips on balancing your budget with expectations. I'm not saying you have to go out and spend a lot of money on a photographer like us. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is find a photographer that works with your budget and works with your experience, and who is willing to be clear and communicate with you about your vision and about the budget. Okay, because this is very, very important. If you have $1,000 budget for a photographer, they need to know that. And they need to agree to that coming into this. And sometimes you're going to luck out at $1,000 for a wedding and get a great photographer. Somebody who's really got some talent. And sometimes at $1,000, you might get whatever you get, who's out there shooting in JPEG and then trying to edit it, which just does not work. Okay, it doesn't look right. So you're going to want to keep these things in mind. Okay, so I want to just kind of recap here. Figure your style. Figure your budget. Hire your photographer first. Get their input, okay? And know what it is that you're looking for and know what it is that your photographer does and work within that, okay? Consider your budget. And don't ever approach the photographer and say, I just need you for a couple of hours. Because a real photographer, a pro, is generally not going to take on a wedding or something like that for just a couple of hours because they know there's a lot more work that goes into that. So anyway, I want to invite you to subscribe, like, comment, share this podcast. If you found it interesting, there's some links in the description to our social media. Feel free to connect with us. I'd love to connect with you. And I'd love to have a conversation with you about photography and about your photography needs. And if we're the right photographer for you, great. If we're not, I totally get that too. We turn down just as many jobs as walk through the door. We turn them down all the time because they're not a good fit for us. So keep that in mind. Be sure to connect with us, and I hope you've enjoyed this first episode of The Cutting Room Floor. I'm Matt Pierce. Thanks for joining me, and we'll talk again soon. Have a good one.